suggest a commitment that's made prior to a marriage consummation. What it simply would suggest is this: I'm committed to you before the wedding date. See, we call it an engagement. And we have the tendency, if things are not well during the engagement period, we'll break it off. But a betrothal is a bit deeper than just a mere engagement. A betrothal is this: it suggests that I'm so dedicated and hooked up with you that before I ever come to the altar and say to you, I want you to be my wife, to have and to hold, to love and to cherish, for good and bad, sickness and in health, you know, for better or for worse, richer or for poorer, whatever it says, and I do take you to be my lawfully wedded husband or wife. Before you ever get to that point, a betrothal says this: I'm so knitted to you that nobody can break us up. I'm so knitted to you that my eyes are not going to wander for anybody else. I'm so knitted to you that I don't care who showed up. I don't care if it's Jigger. I don't care who it is. Nobody can take me from you, baby, because I love you so much that I'm so intertwined with you and connected to you that nobody can steal the love that I have for you. God is saying, I'm going to betroth myself to you forever. Listen to what he says to Israel. He says, although you've cheated on me and messed up on me, walked out on me, the relationship that we're going to have going forward, nobody can break it up. I don't care what God you try. I don't care what God you go after. The love I have for you, I'm going to be so committed, and it is forever. Aren't you glad that God hooked up with you forever? And it doesn't matter what anybody else tries to do or how they try to separate you. Aren't you glad you're so hooked into the holy that it doesn't matter when anything or anybody else try to pull you away from him? It doesn't matter where you go. God is saying, my love for you is like glue. You can't break us apart. You can't separate us. I don't care if you even try to walk away yourself. I love you, Israel, despite all of that. It says in the text, it says, I betroth myself to you. It says in text, verse 19, he says, yes, I betroth you to me in righteousness and in justice. It says to test Israel, you can't do enough to make yourself right with me. And that's the word for us today, because we think we can do enough good stuff that we can impress God with our good doings. Your doing is not what makes God love you. That doesn't make God love. You going to church doesn't make God love you anymore. Because a lot of folk go to church full of hell. Doesn't make God love you anymore. Doesn't make God love you anymore because you look suited up on Sunday. Doesn't make God love you anymore because you're booted up on Monday. Doesn't make God love you anymore because you look like you're saved. God's love for us and the righteousness that we have in us is not based upon us. The righteousness that we have, it has been imputed to us. We had bankrupt accounts. Our accounts were in the negative, and we had no currency to put in the bank to bring it right. But there was a man named Jesus that went to Calvary's Hill, and they pierced him in the side. I mean, they put a crown of thorns on his head, and what was happening was the currency that was running out of him was the blood of the sacrificial lamb. And every time they pierced him and blood was shed, it was money going into our righteousness account. So don't you get beside yourself thinking that you're rich in your righteousness because of you. You can make a deposit. Everything you tried to put in, it was rejected. But when Jesus showed up to make a deposit in your account, when the teller looked at Jesus' currency, the teller had to say, this is the best thing that we've seen. It put you over the limit. You have more than you'll ever be able to pay him back for. And thanks be unto God. That's why we are righteous. Folk walking around here talking about they're more righteous than everybody else. That's self-righteous. Self-righteousness is not the same as God's righteousness. You walking around trying to condemn everybody else because you know more scriptures. That does not make you righteous. What makes you righteous is when God sees you through the blood of Jesus. And you ought to thank God that he sees you through the blood of Jesus Christ, because he wanted to take you out. You did enough nasty stuff this morning that he could have taken you out, but he picked you and he said, when I wanted to take you out, Jesus said, wait a minute, look at what you see again, Father. Don't you see my blood? I'm covered by the blood. You ought to thank God that you're covered by the blood, because it's not your head covering, it's not the hair on your head, it's not the home that you live in, it's the blood of Jesus that covers you. I'm preaching in this house. I just pat myself on the back, preach, Davidson. Then he goes on to say, he says, if God meted out his justice, do you really know where we would be if God meted out his justice? We don't deserve to be here. We do not deserve to be sitting here today. The Lord has us on life support. Life support is what we are on. Life support is when you're on a system and you're not breathing on your own, but you have something that's helping you to breathe. It's helping keep you alive. God is our life support. The day he disconnects from us is the day you breathe no longer. So when you get up, you ought to thank God that he still left you on life support. See, family folk would, if they could pull the plug on you, because they would, the devil would have pulled the plug along. He's always trying to get in the room to pull the plug on you, but he can't get to you because you are covered. Aren't you glad that every time the enemy shows up at your door trying to sneak in under the cover of a nurse or a doctor and trying to get in, Jesus says you can't come in. Says you can't come in. Every time the devil tries to take you out, you can't come in. That's what he says to Israel. Despite what the enemy is trying to do to disconnect you from me, you can't get disconnected, because when I hooked into you, I hooked into you forever. Then it goes on to say, it says, and I will betroth to you and me, you to me in righteousness and in justice. Verse 19c says, in loving kindness and in compassion. It says, not only am I going to hook up with you forever, I'm not just going to be a live-in lover. You know, some folk just want you to stay to pay the bills. You might as well go and clap. You probably got somebody, maybe you know somebody. Not you, but you know somebody. They don't really like each other, but they need some help paying the bills. That gets old. This love, God says, I am going to be with you because I love you. Boy, nothing like being with somebody when it's real love. You can be broke, busted, and disgusted, eating spam and potted meat, but you say, baby, I sure enough love you. Then you can be eating filet mignon. I know it's filet mignon. I know. Drinking Cristal and don't even like to look at each other.